So in this tiny bag is a pyramid shelter with an inner mesh that can be used in 4 seasons in some of the worst weather imaginable, and it weighs less than 750 grams. So in the preparation planning phase of my gear for my through hike of the GR11, I was scouring the internet trying to find the perfect tarp shelter kind of setup for me. I did consider looking at Z-Packs and some other similar really lightweight tents, but ultimately I went with this lightweight PyraOmm. It comes from a company in Ukraine, and these guys are out using the equipment in all kinds of weather. If you go and check out their Instagram account, you'll see these tents being used in some pretty harsh weather in the Carpathian Mountains, and that was immediately to me a good sign. I reached out to the company and asked if they would send me one so I could use it on the hike, post some pictures on Instagram, promote it in general. I wasn't planning on doing a big in-depth review, but it was highly requested from a lot of you guys who watch the channel. So in this video, I'm reviewing 2 products, really. The lightweight equipment PyraOmm tarp and the lightweight inner half mesh. So that's enough faffing about. I'm gonna put the tent up and get into the review. That is the mesh. And here is the shelter. Usually I'd have these 2 things connected and it goes up in a second. But first I'm going to talk about the shelter. So we're going to put that up first, then we can do the mesh later. So I've just loosely staked out all 4 corners. I'll put one here, and the final one will be at the main entrance here. So I would say 6 is really the minimum number of stakes to use with this shelter. I'm gonna grab my trekking pole here. So one of the big reasons why this setup is so light is because it doesn't have any poles. You will use a trekking pole. Failing that, you can support it with a tree branch up above, but I found there was very few times where I was able to do that. Okay, and that's more or less it. I haven't adjusted any of the corners yet. One of the things that you will find, oh no, I got it pretty much right. Sometimes it changes when you close the zip there, but obviously I need to adjust this a little to make it a little more neat. I could probably take some tension off here. I'm gonna try and get it nice and square so it looks good, and also so it's, you know, evenly distributed through the stakes. Okay, that looks pretty good. So during the setup and over the time of you adjusting and opening and closing the doors, you'll have to be doing a lot of this, adjusting this very simple, very smart system here with the paracord and this little piece of plastic that creates a bite in the rope that enables the paracord to grab back on itself and create tension in the system. So pretty easy to set up. I'm going to show you one of the things that I love most about this tent, and it's got 2 doors. I'm going to open them up and give you a full 360. So that's going to give you a good idea of what is in the structure of the shelter without the mesh. There's not much to it once you fold those doors away, which is partly why it's so light. I didn't use it very often in this setup because I always had the inner mesh, but I can imagine, you know, hanging out, spending some nice enjoyable days in the alpine summer kicking back under this thing for sure. So what I'll do now is I'll grab the inner mesh and we'll put that up on the inside with the doors open so you can see what it looks like. Now the inner mesh only has 1 door, so you'll have to lay that out whichever way you like to align it with where you want the door. So the way you connect the inner mesh is via this little clip that's attached to a bungee cord and the inner mesh, and you just clip it on the end of the shelter there. Do that on all 4 sides. Do a little adjusting so we get the mesh in the right spot. And now we could connect the top of the inner mesh up here underneath the trekking pole. So we've got another bungee cord there with a clip, and that connects up here at the top where this HDPE grid stop is to protect the top of the tent. So here we run into the first and pretty much the only issue that I have with this tent, and that is the obvious, and that is that there's a trekking pole that runs right through the middle of the tent. And so far for me, there's no real good way to get around this. However, the company has just released an adaptation that you can add to the top of the tent that looks like you can actually have the pole out to the side here. I haven't got one of those yet. It's on the shopping list to get, as well as the full mesh. I did try to put it up with 2 poles on either side. It was just a little bit awkward. Maybe it was the length of the pole that I was using, which was my Lecky trail running pole, and that one was quite short. So the length of trekking pole you're using is something that you will have to take into account. The pole that I use, like I said, this one is 129 centimeters, and that wasn't quite enough for me to get the most of the height out of the tent. So I often would just use like a rock that I find lying around to boost it up another 5 or 8 centimeters, and that gave me enough distance. You'll see there's one air vent on either side here. I always kept it open. It was never a problem to keep it open in the rain, but for whatever reason, if you wanted to, you can just close it. There's a Velcro tab there. You'll notice there's a bunch of extra tabs with those line locks around the outside of the tent here. I very rarely use them. They are just there to add a couple of extra adjustment points if you need to pull out the walls. You know, if you're on uneven ground and you need to pull this section out a little bit further. Look at that. Doesn't give a shit about the wind.
But fucking disappointing.
So I was gonna get one of these. Like, everyone carries on about how good they are, but
I don't know. I think we'll see in the morning, but this is fucking shit.
So, welcome inside. Not a lot of room in here, as you can see, but again, this is designed to be an ultralight through hiking tent, or shelter rather. And there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind when it comes to shelters. Firstly, condensation is going to be more of an issue with this type of tent than with a double walled tent. Personally, for me, it was never a problem. It may be a problem if you've got 2 people in here and you're brushing up against the walls, so keep that in mind. And I have spent a night in here with one other person, and that was very, very cozy, but that's going to be much more comfortable when I get the full mesh. In the inside of the tent itself, not really much to talk about. There is one little mesh pocket up the top here where I kept little knickknacks and a dry bag full of, you know, important stuff. In the inner mesh here, you can see this bathtub floor design where the mesh meets the bottom of the tent here, and you can see you've got about 8 to 10 centimeters worth of distance, and that just really helps keep everything organized, and it helps keep you and all of your stuff dry when you're inside of the tent. So in my experience, single walled tents like this tend to work better in alpine environments where it's dry and it's cold and you're not getting as much rain. If you are in an area that's bucketing down all the time, then I think it's probably better off that you get a double walled tent, just because they tend to handle moisture and handle rain a lot better. I never had any rain problems in this tent. I was always dry, very comfortable. I'm just pointing out that if you're in somewhere that gets a lot more rain, like Scotland, Ireland, you know, Tasmania, maybe the Pacific Northwest, I don't know, if there's a lot of rain around, you might want to consider just going with a double walled tent, because if you're out in the rain constantly, then this might not be the best structure for your typical weather hiking, backpacking situation. So let's talk size for a second. If you set this thing up correctly, you've got 4 square meters of space. So 164 centimeters this way, 272 centimeters that way, and 1 meter 30 or 130 centimeters in height. So that gives you around 4 square meters to work with. I am 5'11" and I'm super comfortable in this variation with the size that I have. And so if you need more space, or if you need less space and you want to cut down the weight a little bit, then you've got an option there as well. Now, when I've got the half mesh here, a little bit over half of that is taken up within the inside of the tent itself, and then you've got the rest left over for the vestibule. And that worked really well for me because I wanted to keep my gear and all my kind of dirty stuff, my kitchen area, outside of the tent here, things that didn't necessarily need to be bone dry. One of the things that will be a little bit challenging is when I use this with another person, and when I get the full mesh, there won't be any vestibule space left, or basically none. So I'm gonna have to come up with a solution like a pack cover or a way to keep the rest of my stuff dry or relatively dry on the outside of the tent and keep the rest of the important things still dry within the tent. I'm very confident in using it in the snow conditions. Obviously, one thing I will get is another layer of tent floor, something like Tyvek I think would be a good option. On my GR11 trip actually just used an emergency blanket. I put that down underneath, which maybe gave me a little bit of a thermal property and an extra protection for the base of the inner mesh, because this stuff is very thin. You know, it's quite strong, but I don't want to get a situation where I have to repair it, so I think it's best to get a tent floor. Tyvek would be a good option, super light, very durable, and then you don't have to worry about getting a hole in the bottom of the mesh. So let's talk technical specs. So it's essentially pregnated in polyester with ripstop, so that's for added durability. That's a 20 denier ripstop nylon rated to 2000 millimeters. It is silicon double coated using 1.1 ounce polyester, and the fabric is coated with a silicon PU layer on each side, meaning that it is waterproof, but it's not breathable. It's not like a membrane. The two entrances to the tent are YKK zips, and they've got AquaGuard around the outside, meaning that water can't get through there. The shelter comes with 10 guy lines, so the little paracord there with reflective tape around the outside so you don't trip over yourself in the middle of the night, along with those little line lock clips for simple and easy adjustment of the shelter over time. So why did I go with this tent in particular? Well, it's usable in any conditions, you know, whether I want to be on coastal, alpine, snow, rain, it does the lot. Like I said, it's not optimal for really, really rainy conditions, but for where I'm at here in northern Spain, Pyrenees, it's absolutely fine. I wanted this tent primarily as an ultralight through hiking tent that was quick to set up and had plenty of space, but I also wanted a good option for weekend camping with two people, you know, two doors, lots of ventilation and plenty of room. I got this grey version because I didn't want to stand out too much. I want to be, you know, reasonably covert about the places that I'm camping, and that grey happens to blend in really well with the alpine environments of the Pyrenees. There's also varying sizes of this tent now, which is a new thing. They've just come out as of March 2021. And so if you need more space or if you need less space and you want to cut down the weight a little bit, then you've got an option there as well. So what are the things that I don't like about this tent? Well, the first and the most obvious thing is having the trekking pole in the middle of the tent. That's a bit of a hassle. The mesh itself is super, super fine. Obviously they've gone for lightweight here being the priority. I was terrified a couple of times when I snagged a zipper within the mesh. I was thinking, you know, that was going to be it for the mesh. It was going to tear. There is a couple of tiny holes in it, but it's nothing serious. Thankfully that mesh is light, but also pretty strong, but that's something to consider. The sill poly does absorb moisture a little bit. I mean, for the most part, it beads and runs off, and it also dries very quickly once you shake it out and put it in the sun for 10 minutes. Most of the time it's dry, but it does absorb it a little bit. And I think that's something that you wouldn't get if this tent was made from DCF. And I think there is a DCF version. As far as I'm aware, last time I looked, there was a prototype, so that may be for sale sometime in the future. But my assumption is that that will be quite a little bit more expensive. Also, the thing with the sill poly is that it is very fine. You know, it's only 20 denier. It is going to be abrasion resistant to some extent. Don't just go throwing it around and not looking after it. It's not as durable as some of those thicker, heavier fabrics, so you need to take care of it. So if you're looking for a lightweight tarp or tent that is really good quality and priced really well, if you're in Europe, then I think this is probably a good option to go for. For me, you know, I looked at Z-Packs and some of these other options in the States, but it was just hideously expensive for me to get them shipped over here to Europe. And that might be the case for you if you are in the States. So by all means, check out the website and look at the pricing and make the decision yourself. So if you've seen the other reviews, you know that I love this tent. I'm going to be using this for a while. In fact, I love it so much that I got it tattooed on myself. Check out that. That is a little rendition of a photo I took on the GR11. This thing was my home for 30 days. It was a big part of my journey, and I had so many beautiful nights sleep in this tent. And I hope to have many more as soon as I can get back out there legally. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you have any questions, anything I didn't answer, feel free to let me know in the comments section. I know that there's some of you out there that are really deep into this stuff and probably know a lot more than I do, so Feel free to fill in the gaps for me. That's about it for this video. I'll see you on the summit.